8 million. That is how many people around you will be gone. Before this ends, not soldiers, not warriors on a battlefield, neighbors, children, the woman who sells maize 3 streets from your door. It is the last week of October, 1520. You live inside Tenochtitlan, a city built on a lake, stitched together by causeways and canals. Home to more people than London or Paris right now. Canoes glide beneath your window every morning, stacked with cacao and cotton and fish. You have survived war this year already. Spanish soldiers marched into your city and took your ruler hostage, and were driven out in a single bloody night you still dream about. You think the worst has passed. It has not. Something else has slipped through the gates. Something no obsidian blade can cut down. It rides in blood and breath and touch. It does not care that you warriors are among the fiercest in the world. It does not care about your gods, your calendar, or your 14 generations of ancestors who built this island city out of a swamp. What do you feel first when your own skin starts to itch in a way it never has before? A fever that will not break. Then the marks. Small at first, easy to explain away. By the time you understand what they mean, half your street already knows too. Here is the number that should stop you cold. In the century before this one, a bad harvest might kill 1 household in 10. What is coming for your city this winter will take 1 person in every 3. Maybe closer to 1 in 2 before the rains return. You do not know its name yet. You only know that something is coming for the body itself. And there is no wall, no canal, no army built to stop it. The first sign of trouble did not begin inside your city walls. It began on the coast, months earlier, carried by a man most history books never bothered to name. His name was Francisco de Guia, an enslaved African man forced to travel with a Spanish expedition sent from Cuba under a captain named Panfilo de Narvaez. By the time that expedition reached the shore near Veracruz, in the spring of 1520, Eguia was already sick. The people who took him in and cared for him were a Totonac community near the coast, and they caught the sickness from him within days. What none of them knew yet was that this single chain of contact would eventually reach a lake city hundreds of miles inland and help decide the fate of an empire. The Franciscan friar, Bernardino de Sahagún, later gathered testimony from Nahua survivors. Compiled into a 12-volume record known today as the Florentine Codex, one account preserved there describes the disease in blunt, physical terms. Sores erupting across the face, the chest, the stomach, spreading until the sick could no longer move without screaming in pain. Your healers call it Huezahuatl, the great sickness. In your language, that name simply means a rash unlike any other. The healers themselves are called Titichich, men and women trained for years in the properties of plants, in setting bone, in easing fever. They are not helpless. They are among the most skilled medical practitioners anywhere in the world at this point in history. According to medical historian Bernard Ortiz de Montellano, who has studied Aztec treatment methods in detail, so you do what any reasonable person would do. You go to them. The first thing a Titichi does is cool the fever. Mud is packed gently over the worst of the sores, drawing out heat. Steam rises inside a temazcal, a low stone sweat bath built into the ground, where herbs are thrown onto heated rocks. Sage, epazote, marigold, their scent thick in the humid air. You are told to breathe it in slowly. Elsewhere in the house, sap is drained from the thick leaves of the maguey plant, and smoothed over open wounds, the same treatment healers have used for generations. On burns and cuts. For a few days, it seems to be working. Fevers that were spiking begin to ease in the mildest cases. Neighbors who feared the worst are sitting up, eating again. Word spreads through your street that the Titichi have found something that holds the sickness back. You let yourself believe it too. Then the floor drops out from under you. The pustules that looked mild in the first cases begin appearing thicker, closer together, on the people who were supposedly recovering. And the healers themselves, the very people you have been relying on, start falling ill one by one. A Titichi cannot treat 100 patients from a sick bed. The historian Camilla Townsend, author of Fifth Son, notes something important, that entire households were left with no one well enough to fetch water or prepare food, let alone nurse the sick. Which question do you sit with tonight? Do you keep trusting the medicine that seemed to work at first? Or do you accept that something about this sickness is different from anything your healers have faced before? Because the sickness is not the only danger now. The indigenous chronicler, Fernando Alvarado Tezozomoc, writing in the Chronica Mexicayotl, traces how quickly the crisis widened. People too weak to leave their beds could not tend their fields or carry water. Canoes that once moved maize and fish through the canals sit unused. Hunger begins creeping in behind the fever, quieter but just as deadly. Officials in the city try something else. Word comes down that the sick should stay inside their own homes, or be moved to separate districts away from the healthy. It is, in essence, an attempt at isolation, the same basic idea a modern doctor would recognize instantly. But your city is not built for that kind of distance. Homes sit close together along narrow canals. Extended families share single rooftops. Ordering people apart is one thing. Doing it in a city this dense, with this many people already sick, is another massive. Tonight, as you listen to Coughing Through the Wall, the room next to yours, one question will not leave you alone. If the people you love most are the ones now covered in sores, could you actually bring yourself to walk away from them to save your own life? You do not walk away. Not fully. Isolation sounds simple in theory, a clean line between the sick and the well. But theory dissolves fast when the person coughing through the wall is your mother. Your brother, the child you've raised since birth. What actually happens across the city is something messier. Partial separation. A sick relative moved to a back room instead of the main sleeping space. A neighbour left food outside a doorway rather than carrying it in by hand. People try to thread a needle between protecting themselves and refusing to abandon each other. And most days, they fail at both. The attempted isolation slows nothing in a meaningful way. Historians studying the outbreak note that officials ordering the sick apart ran straight into the geography of the city itself. Causeways, canals, and packed rooftop housing that made real distance almost impossible to enforce. So the herbal treatments continue alongside it. Not because anyone has full faith in them anymore, but because doing something feels better than doing nothing while someone you love is suffering in front of you. Now picture the room itself. Reed mats on the floor, still warm from the last person who lay there. Copal smoke curling from a small dish in the corner. An offering, half medicine and half prayer. The scent of scorched sage from the temescal drifting in from outside. Your hands, cracked from carrying water for a household that can no longer carry it for itself. You kneel beside the person you are trying to save, and there is nothing left to do but press a cool cloth against skin that will not stop burning. And wait, this is the decision point, laid bare. Not a single dramatic choice, but hundreds of small ones repeated every hour. Stay close or step back. Trust the treatment or admit it is not enough. Ration the last of the food for yourself, or split it one more time with someone who may not live to eat it. Here is what actually happened, according to the historical record. The epidemic tore through the city for roughly 60 days, from around October into early December of 1520. Among those who died was Cuitlahuac, the man who had become emperor after Moctezuma. He had ruled for exactly 80 days. A leader chosen specifically for his skill in war, brought down not by a Spanish blade, but by a fever no obsidian shield could stop, and far from the city, on the coast, where all of this began. Francisco de Eguía, the enslaved man whose sickness had started the chain, was already gone. He died in the care of the Totonac people who had taken him in, months before the epidemic ever reached Tenochtitlan. He never saw the empire his illness helped bring down. He likely never knew his name would eventually be tied to one of the deadliest epidemics in human history. He was simply a man, forced across an ocean against his will, who caught a disease he did not choose to carry, and died among strangers who had shown him kindness. Scholars studying the broader outbreak across Mesoamerica estimate a staggering loss, somewhere between 5 and 8 million people in this first wave alone. Not soldiers lost in battle, ordinary people in ordinary homes. In a city that had weathered war just months earlier and thought it had already faced its hardest test, if the strongest, most capable leader in the city could not outsurvive this sickness, what chance did anyone believe they truly had? By the following spring, when Spanish forces returned to finish what they had started, Tenochtitlan was not the city it had been a year earlier. Its causeways still stood. Its canals still moved between the same stone foundations. But the people who had once filled its streets, cared for its markets, and fought so fiercely to drive the Spanish out on that single bloody night were gone in numbers that made resistance nearly impossible. The empire that fell in 1521 did not fall primarily to Spanish steel or to horses, or to gunpowder. Cortés commanded a few hundred European soldiers. What actually broke the city's ability to fight was already inside its walls, months before the final siege began. Here is the reversal worth sitting with. The most feared weapon in this conquest was never carried by a conquistador at all. It was carried unknowingly and against his will by an enslaved man, who had no army, no title, no power over anyone's fate, least of all his own. Francisco de Eguía did not choose to cross an ocean. He did not choose to fall sick near a coastline 500 miles from a city he never lived to see. And yet the chain of infection that began with his suffering reshaped the outcome of an empire more thoroughly than any battle that followed. Meanwhile, Cuitlahuac, chosen specifically because he was a proven warrior, a man selected to lead his people through exactly this kind of crisis, lasted 80 days in power before the same invisible force that killed ordinary families in ordinary homes killed him too. Rank did not protect him. Preparation for war did not protect him. In this outbreak, the outcome had almost nothing to do with strength, and almost everything to do with something no one in the city could see coming or fighting back against. That is the quiet, unsettling truth beneath this entire event. A city can build causeways across open water. It can train warriors who terrify their enemies. It can produce healers skilled enough to be studied by scholars 5 centuries later. None of that mattered against an enemy transmitted through breath and touch, one that did not care who was strong, who was wealthy, or who wore the feathered mantle of an emperor. Think about what stands between you and that same fate today. A small vial kept cold in a clinic somewhere. A handful of doses, developed, tested, and given to you, often without a second thought. Sometimes as a child, sometimes without you even remembering the appointment. That single unremarkable object is the difference between a fever that passes in a week and a sickness that could have emptied entire neighborhoods around you, the way it once emptied entire cities on this same land. The people of Tenochtitlan tried everything available to them. Steam and herbs, isolation and prayer, kindness towards strangers, even dying ones. The same kindness that unknowingly helped a disease travel farther than any army could march. They were not careless. They were not unprepared. They simply lived before the one invention that could have saved millions of them existed anywhere in the world. 8 million people. That was the true cost of a battle no one in that city could see, hear, or fight back against. Only endure.